people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
We're selling ourselves short here. Let's pull this. You know, we cut the tape, and they pulled out. They pulled out from the fight, and Eddie was ranting and raving, and everyone was like, "Oh, she's a coward." Da da da. The fight happened 6 months later, and Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor had the biggest payday, sold out headline at the MSG, and that only happened because someone had the foresight, the care for female boxing. That this is bigger than this. This is just bigger than a fight. This is it for female boxing, and you know Eddie doesn't seem interested in building Beatrice Ferreira. I'm not gonna lie. He wants to build off the back of me, where I'm trying to build myself as one of the best female fighters ever. So, you know, I see the potential, and if he doesn't see the potential, you know, that's his loss. You know, I'm not gonna go on his time. I'm gonna go on my time, because one thing I have noticed about Eddie is that he doesn't really care about female boxing anymore. That's what I've picked up. You know, it took Katie Taylor going on to Jake Paul to get the money that she deserved. It took her fighting on a Jake Paul undercard to get the money that she deserved. Why wasn't Eddie not paying that? She's selling out arenas. She is the only fighter, male and female, that I know right now that can sell out an arena like that, a stadium like that, and he's not giving her what she deserves. So, you know, that's me looking in. So it just tells me that his mind is not on female boxing. So if your mind is elsewhere, you know, do your thing. He should be promoting Beatrice Ferreira. He should be building this fight. He should be making her chase Eddie Hearn, and we can have a massive unification. Undisputed, all the belts. Who's the best in the division? Let's find out.
To address Caroline Dubois' latest line of bullshit, because that's what it is, it's all bullshit. This is where I don't like Caroline Dubois. The nerve of her, taking shots at Eddie Hearn using Katie Taylor as the anchor for the argument, when it's Eddie Hearn's work with Katie Taylor over close to 10 years now that actually conditioned an audience that would accept a Caroline Dubois fight or a Jonas versus Price fight. Before Eddie's work with Katie, who else in the British boxing scene was doing that? Who else was promoting women boxers? Never mind the British boxing scene. Who else in boxing? Boxing as a whole. The nerve of her. You talk about the money that Katie Taylor made from her recent fight with Amanda Serrano, the money that Netflix put up. Why do you think they put up so much money? Do they put up that kind of money for just any woman boxer? You talk about the end result with no regard for the process that led up to that. That it was through Matchroom's promotion of this fighter that they got her to a point that a Netflix is willing to offer up that kind of money. It doesn't happen by itself. Asking why wasn't Eddie Hearn paying it at? Because your promoter's doing so much better? Your promoter is the one who failed to secure Savannah Marshall's ring return for the card that you're about to box on. And he was about to screw the pooch with Francesca Hennessy, too. Your promoter is only piggybacking off the foundations that Matchroom laid for women boxers. You're just trying to duplicate what Matchroom did. The nerve of her. Don't try to use Katie Taylor as the anchor for your argument, because you're no Katie Taylor. And that much is obvious. So early in your professional boxing career, Katie Taylor was never as selective as you are. Strength to strength, from excitement to excitement. Katie Taylor was never as picky with her food as you are. But she didn't do it alone. She reached out to Eddie, and Eddie rolled the dice. He took the gamble, and it paid off. So that girls like you, that now even have a platform to fight on, could turn around and criticize him? And for what? Because he wants you to fight Beatrice. That's what it really is. See, what you thought was you were gonna go through the lightweight division bullying girls that don't have the same amateur background that you do. Big fish in a small pond. And remember that Carolyn was the same one who not that long ago was taking shots at Katie, claiming that she was holding the belts hostage Beatrice has a belt. She wants to unify titles with you. And all you can say is, you'll do it on your own time, and not Eddie's.
I'll bet.
But I thought you wanted belts. Isn't that what you were complaining about? That you wanted belts. Beatrice has a belt, and what you want for Beatrice is to go after somebody else's.
Ah, so you've been paying attention. You know that Stephanie Hahn just became WBA champion, and your recommendation is that Beatrice should go after her so she doesn't keep the pressure on you.
Because you're scared.
You can have a great amateur pedigree. You can be talented. Carolyn is talented, but along with that,
She's scared. She's terrified of Beatrice. She is attempting to age her out, and in all likelihood, she will succeed because Beatrice is several years older than her. That's very obvious.
and that's why she's taking shots at Eddie. You say that he's trying to build Beatrice off of your back. What the hell else is he supposed to do? You have a belt.
You think you're only supposed to fight cream puffs?
You want a belt. The training wheels come off. That's the way it goes. You're mad at Eddie because he's got Beatrice, and now there's pressure on you to fight her.
Eddie even offered to send her to you, and you'll say it's because he doesn't care about women's boxing, when in reality, it's because you won't cross the street to fight her, so she's willing to cross over to fight you, and you don't want it.
Eddie doesn't care about women's boxing? Then why's he got both Sky Nicholson and Shernika Johnson on a Matchroom show in Australia?
Meanwhile, your promoter cut both Ebony Jones loose, April Hunter.
Felt to secure Savannah Marshall's ring return.
Enough of the fantasy, let's talk reality. You're only taking shots at Eddie because he wants you to fight Beatrice. And why shouldn't he? You're champions at the same weight.
How long is this supposed to take?
When you're ready. And how long is that going to be? You're telling me that the same girl that said she was ready for Katie Taylor and says she is ready for Alicia Baumgartner isn't ready for Beatrice Ferreira.
Why not?
If you're ready for fighters as experienced as they are, why wouldn't you be ready for Beatrice?
She's scared.
You brought up a super featherweight up to lightweight when there was a unification match right there you could have had. And it's because you're scared. It's not because of nothing else.
It's because you're scared.
You don't fool anybody. You don't fool me.
When Rayo got that fight, we did tell him, why that fight, Rayo? Why, the Russos have always been great fighters, man. They're an Olympian, all wins by knockout. Could have been somebody else. And they told me it's him or nobody else. He said they forced him to fight him, and then he says they didn't even let me get a rematch clause. You're the champion. It's your voluntary title defense. He should have been allowed to get a rematch clause. Everybody does. Pitbull had a rematch clause.
So it would seem that the Garcia camp had the same questions in association with that fight that I did. That to me, it made absolutely no sense for Rayo to afford Gary Russell, who's coming off a loss, a voluntary title opportunity. For what? He's not a big name. There's not big money in it for you. And it would seem that according to Robert Garcia, who trains Rayo, the PBC painted him into a corner. They said it's Gary or nothing.
Or nobody.
For what was a voluntary title defense? My only question now is, would they have let Rayo go somewhere else then? If that was all they had for him on that side of the street, did Rayo have the option of going to a Matchroom, going to a Golden Boy?
A top ring.
You know that I don't think he did. The way some boxing contracts are structured, if a fighter becomes a world champion, if they pick up an alphabet title,
It extends the deal.
and then the fighter can't leave. So that when he can't leave, you tell him, well, all we've got for you is Gary.
They didn't want Rayo to have that belt. And when he won it, it wasn't under their auspices. It wasn't under their banner. That wasn't part of their plan.
What was?
I believe that after Isaac Cruz knocks out Rolly Romero, they wanted to keep Isaac on standby with that belt as an option for Gervonta Davis.
Then why did they let him defend it against Rayo on somebody else's show?
Because they thought Isaac could handle it. They saw Rayo get beat up by Edwin De Los Santos. They tell themselves, Isaac can handle this, and when he does, we get a cut of their purses. The both of them.
We get a percentage of whatever they make on that other guy's show at no expense to us, without us having to spend anything on them.
That's why they did it.
What they didn't anticipate is that Rayo would end up outboxing Isaac Cruz, so Isaac doesn't have a belt now to bring to a Gervonta Davis rematch, which is probably what they were planning.
All of that got ruined by Rayo.
So that Javante ends up scrambling for another opponent. Since Isaac's not an option, Vasyl Lomachenko wasn't one either. He ends up with Lamont Roach, and we all saw the kerfuddle that turned out to be.
They didn't want Rayo to have that belt.
Now credit to Gary Antoine Russell, who I picked to win the fight. I thought, Rayo's a good boxer, make no mistake, he's improved, but he hasn't fought a bona fide 140-pounder yet, and Isaac was not those things. You beat him, but he's little more than a lightweight who moved up in weight like you. They put you in there with Gary, and Gary's gonna be too strong for you.
That's what you saw. Rayo's defense held up for a while, for a bit, but after a bit, it was too much for him.
It's literally what I said would happen several times here on the channel in the build-up of that fight that never made sense to me. You got a belt, parlay that into a payday. You don't put it on the line against Gary Antoine Russell for no reason.
But no money, because you know they didn't pay him much.
It would seem that Rayo didn't have much of a choice, which speaks to the point that Nestor Gibbs raised on the Boxing Voice a few days ago. He gets the sense that what Al Heyman likes to do is use the Latino fighters to build up his other fighters, the ones he's more invested in.
Looks like he did that to Rayo.
He would prefer that Gary have that belt, and I don't know why, since Gary's no more marketable than Rayo. But you painted Rayo into a corner where he didn't have a choice, and this is where having a promoter that acts as both a promoter, a manager, and an advisor breeds a conflict of interest, because is the management and advice you're giving this fighter in his best interests or yours?
You know the answer.
What's more ideal is when you have a manager acting on the behalf of the fighter for his best interests, and sometimes that might go against the promoter. But when you have one guy acting as all three, this is the kind of stuff that happens.
Rayo can come back from this.
But I knew there was something fishy about the entire situation, because it never made sense to me that Rayo should defend his belt against this guy who's done absolutely nothing to earn a shot at his belt. And it's not even a big payday for him.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, veteran promoter Eddie Hearn offered his view on the potential creation of a boxing league. More particular to the conversation, Turkey El El Sheikh, Dana White, and Nick Khan's boxing league.
Much has been said about the formation of a boxing league due to the seemingly burgeoning relationship between TKO and Saudi Arabia, but promoter Eddie Hearn is not involved in that project. Hearn, who along with promotional ally Frank Warren and boxers Ben Shalom, have worked and contributed to make Saudi Arabia a boxing powerhouse. I'll only be talking about what's been said and what's come out, which is obviously a boxing league with TKO, said Hearn. I presume it's on ESPN to replace the Top Rank deal? I don't get the feeling it's like big name fighters. I think if it's UFC boss Dana White and those guys, I think they'll maybe be looking at a lower level to sort of elevate and make those guys stars, like future stars, because I feel like they won't want to be in the business of negotiating purse by purse with managers and lawyers.
I broached this subject, that replacing Top Rank, which is an established brand that boxing fans are already familiar with TKO, that they're not familiar with, that would be counterintuitive of ESPN.
Why start from scratch? Why not just build on what you've already built?
Doesn't make sense.
Eddie Hearn continued, I think maybe they'll be looking at a lower level to sort of elevate and make those guys stars, like future stars, because I feel like they won't want to be in the business of negotiating purse by purse with managers and lawyers and promoters within boxing. They'll want to have a situation they can control, build a narrative, and make fights like that without the aggravation and what generally comes by a lower level with people that are up for fighting anyone.
Because they're not established brands. They don't have much of anything to lose.
Hearn admitted he did not know a great deal about the project, but believes it has a chance given the power brokers behind it. That kind of concept has been done before with smaller names and stuff like that, he added. I don't know if it works, if I'm honest, but these guys are very smart, very powerful, and they have a great platform, so you wouldn't bet against them. Hearn also said that UFC mogul Dana White finally taking a leap into boxing was a good reflection on where the sport finds itself. I think Dana and those guys coming into boxing is a real sign of where boxing's at, said Hearn. Have you ever seen boxing like this before? I mean, it's unbelievable, right? Every week, you know? Riyadh, I mean, we've seen it. It's translated through our shows. Boxing is hot.
And Dana wouldn't be jumping into the deep end if he didn't feel there was money to make. He'd just stick to his UFC like he's been sticking to his UFC. There's an opportunity there.
Now for what isn't being said. You see that the PBC's presence in the sport is receding like a proverbial hairline, leading to male pattern baldness, and you see that Top Rank have their own issues and their own problems that they may end up losing ESPN as a broadcaster. This creates a void that someone has to fill.
The landscape is changing.
And there's new game in town, new players are emerging. On one end, you have Jake Paul and Nakisa Badarian's Most Valuable Promotions on Netflix. On the other, you have Turki El Sheikh, Dana White, and Nick Khan's TKO.
So where some of the established brands are going through some problems right now, it creates a void that someone has to fill, and TKO aspires to fill it with their boxing league. Can they do it?
I said it in my previous video, not just with prospects and not with operating like a bubble like your UFC does.
Not manufacturing your own title and then having your fighters fight for that title as opposed to the same alphabet titles that everybody else is fighting for. This doesn't work if you try to operate like an island.
The PBC tried to do that for a number of years, and you see the end result. Veteran manager Rick Ramos chimed in on this boxing league saying, "This league will create shorter careers and less money. You can also forget about wearing patches and sponsors as well."
Why?
Just thinking about UFC guys and how their deals are structured. When they're signed to Dana White, those fighters don't have the same autonomy that boxers do. There's talk of Dana White and his cohorts trying to repeal the Muhammad Ali Act that prevents one individual from acting as both a manager, an advisor, and a promoter.
But that really only pertains to boxing. When it was made, that's what it was for.
So a former champion turned analyst, Paulie Malignaggi, say, keep this man out of boxing in reference to Dana White, likely with that in mind, that he wants to bring the UFC model to boxing, but a part of that model is the fighters have less autonomy.
Less control, less arms of revenue. It all goes to the brand.
Not everyone is receiving this endeavor with open arms. Some speculate doom and gloom.
Turkey, when he said crush, we're going to crush all the other promotions. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
But what, 1 second, the promotions you've been working with, as in Queensbury and Matchroom and Golden Boy and Top Rank, like what does that mean? I find it interesting. I find it puzzling.
What's puzzling?
What does it mean? Does it mean, okay, does it almost mean kind of what PBC tried to do, where they were trying to create a PBC belt and they tried to sign every single fighter, and they very well nearly exceeded in doing so? Does this mean that he's trying to literally take over the sport of boxing? So all the fighters, all of them are in this league. Do fighters immediately start jumping ship and signing to him? Because to be fair, we're in a world of boxing now where no fighter has an 8-fight contract anymore.
Yeah.
Most fighters are kind of fight-by-fight contracts. I mean, does Shakur Stevenson, who's only got 1 fight left with Matchroom, after that fight, does he go and join his TKO promotions? What does it mean for Eddie? What does it mean for Frank? Are they now on the phone with each other now saying, okay, we're not accepting this, we have to fight back?
Right.
Or do they jump in bed with it? I find the whole thing.
There's certainly a lot of questions.
There is.
And a lot to talk about, more than we have time for in this video, but I will say that if they insist on this league operating like the UFC does, that will inhibit how many fighters they can acquire and how big their names are. So maybe they're not after big names?
Like Eddie Hearn said?
Because the big names can afford attorneys that will revise those contracts this league is providing, and if they don't like them, they'll go somewhere else.
If that's what it's about.
Who is it that Turkey was talking about when he said they will crush everything? Crush who?